All right, we are live for a very special edition of Reeling Them In as Florida State has got 20 signatures by last count. There will be more, obviously, expected through the day. But I'm joined by Charles Fishbein, Osceola recruiting analyst. My name is Pat Burnham, football analyst for Florida State. And Fish, this is a very exciting day for FSU coach Mike Norvell and his staff. It's an exciting day for all these players who are signing around the country. And of course, when I was working in football, it was one of my favorite days. Spring kind of hope is eternal when the National Signing Day comes along and everybody starts thinking about the next football season, even though we have one more day to go. But Florida State's had a huge day. Transfer portal, a big part of it. 6 guys have signed with Florida State that will transfer in. Jeremiah Byers, Jaheim Bell, Daryl Jackson, Kyle Murlock, Casey Roddick, and Keandre Jones. And then 14 high school players have signed scholarships with Florida State today or national letters of intent. Just kind of your overall takeaway from the morning.
Well, every coach in the country today signed everybody they wanted, right? You know, everybody got a Class A class. Nobody missed out on anybody. But and actually, there's no more really drama like there used to be. And my friend was like, I used to like the drama of signing day. Now, most of the kids have pretty much, they pick their schools on this early signing day, and you pretty much know who's going, where they're going, except 1 or 2 kids. But overall, it's pretty climatic, and I think Florida State did a very good job.
Yeah, I do too. And listen, we'll start with the older guys because what we've seen with the moving the early National Signing Day back to into the 20th, 21st of December, and with a lot of these transfers going to start school in January, it only kind of made sense if these guys were committed and sure of where they were going, if they go ahead and announce and sign today. And I think that's something that we will see as we continue to move forward years from now, 2024, 2025, where you'll see these transfer portal guys go ahead and sign. We kind of learned that was going to be the case a couple days ago, and as it turned out, that was the case for FSU. And they're probably not done in the portal. We can get into that, but obviously, it was a big day on the offensive line, both high school wise and portal wise. We think that Chris Otto may be an addition to this class. He is in the middle of his signing ceremony right now, the offensive tackle prospect from Key West. But, hey, just want to get your thoughts on Jeremiah Byers. He's a guy that has a chance, I think, to come in and start right away at guard. But from UTEP, was all-conference USA player, a ton of experience, long, athletic, plays really hard, and a guy that can help FSU right away.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing you notice on film is him. He'll be set up to the outside and then come back quickly to the inside. He can adjust. He's flexible in the hips. He's not a stiff guy, so he can handle a speed rusher, a guy that goes outside and then swims back inside. He can handle any move that an offense or defensive end is going to do to him. So that you have to like that he's versatile too, that he could play either tackle spot or slide inside and play the guard spot. But I think he has a chance to be an all-conference type player next year. He's probably the best transfer portal kid on the O-line that they've signed in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with that for this year in particular. He will be joined by Casey Roddick, the Colorado offensive lineman, who will have 1 year remaining. He was a team captain for Colorado this year. Another highly accomplished player, has played both guard and tackle in his career at Colorado. And another guy that I think, with the loss of Dylan Gibbons and Dimitri Emanuel, that will come in and be a day one starter at guard.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about this. Personally, I feel these 2 guys, they upgraded both guard spots. And I thought Gibbons and Mitchell, they held down the fort. And this is what you want to do, is you want to gradually get better. I think these 2 guys upgrade both those positions. Roddick's a little different. He's not as athletic as the Byers kid. He's more of an in the phone booth type of player. He could get on a guy, and once he locks in on a defender, he locks them up. They can't move. He's a strong kid, has a strong base. I think what Norvell likes to do with his offensive lineman and their run game, he's going to be very effective right away. I think they landed 2 important pieces. We've talked about this. Offensive linemen aren't the sexy players in a recruiting class, but you are not going to win without the O-line and D-line, and these 2 pieces help that team immensely going into next year.
All right, and then I think one that kind of surprised both of us, Auburn offensive guard Keandre Jones. He committed yesterday, signed today. Was a starter as in 2021, was relegated to a backup role in 2022. Did start against Penn State and Alabama. Seems to be more accomplished as a run blocker than a pass blocker. How do you see him fitting into FSU's plans when he gets here in the spring?
Yeah, I mean, Norvell likes to run the ball. He fits that mold of what they're looking for. They help each other out in the pass blocking and their schemes and stuff. The run blocking is what these guys are looking for. And that's something that you have to have in you. You know this with the old lineman. You could teach a guy how to pass block or some techniques to help themselves out. But all run blocking is a lot of time is attitude and will and want to. And these guys all seem to want to do that, including this kid from Auburn. All three guys like to run block. They get on their defenders. They like to put them in the turf. And that's what you like to see out of all three of these guys.
Yeah. Listen, I think all three needed additions. I think two of them come in as starters. I think the other one's going to be given a chance to compete for a starting job, but it certainly gives you a guy with a wealth of experience, having started, I think, 19 games in his career at Auburn. He's got a chance to help Florida State tremendously and add some depth. And listen, that bringing in three fish may be telltale sign that there may be some guys on their way out. We'll talk about that as we continue to get through the offseason. Listen, another position where they just killed it in the portal was tight end. They land probably the most versatile skill player in the portal in Jaheim Bell from Valdosta, Georgia, who was at South Carolina. And then, of course, Kyle Murlock, a little bit of a different player, more of a true tight end than Jaheim, but just talk about those two guys and what they bring to this FSU offense, which, depending on who comes back and who doesn't, could be a loaded offense for 2023.
Yeah, if Mike Norvell could go into a lab and create a player, I think Jaheim Bell would be the guy he would come out with. His versatility and his ability to play multiple positions. You don't have to just line this guy up as a traditional tight end. He could line up as an H-back. You saw last year, I believe he played some wildcat, so he could run the ball. They take Benson out. They have another big guy that could pound that rock between the tackles. He also could go slip out into the flats, get up into the wheel routes, and also run some deep seam routes. He's athletic. He gives you a guy that, honestly, as a defensive coach, you have to worry about, because do you put a linebacker on him and they're not fast enough? Do they put a DB on him? They're not big enough. He's a mismatch to any defense you go against. The other kid from Shorter, Morlock, I think he's more of an inline blocker. They can run him down the seam and across the middle. He's going to be more of a possession guy, probably used more in the red zone. He'll be a situational guy. I think Bell is the guy that's more versatile. Morlock will help out in the parts of their offense. Like I said, try to help out in that run game, set that edge, be able to get those stretch runs that you want to get on teams, be able to get your running backs out to that edge and lock that up. So I think both of them bring different skill sets. Both of them come to a position that Norvell loves to use. If you go back to his days at Memphis, he liked to use a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets. He's going to be able to get back to that this year with these additions, along with some of the younger guys they have on their roster. But these two guys really improve that room. You talk about that tight end room. There's been a lot of disappointment so far. These two guys improve that room and make that offense even better heading into 2023.
Yeah, and I want to stay on the transfer guys, but we just found out that offensive tackle. We'll talk a little bit about him later, but offensive tackle Christopher Otto from Key West High School has just submitted his NLI to Florida State, so he's official. So it gives him a second high school offensive lineman. We'll get into that here in a little bit. Fish, we have a question. What are we hearing on Akeem Williams? There's reason to believe that maybe his NIL is at Florida State already, but they're waiting to make it official with his announcement ceremony. Got some nervous listeners and viewers. What are you hearing on Akeem as everything seemed to be in place there?
Listen, I know Travis Hunter made everybody nervous last year and are uneasy because of what he did. Listen, Hakeem, if he pulls this off and goes to another school, I'm going to take him to Vegas and play poker, because this kid has been all FSU. I mean, he recruits everybody to FSU. He's friends with everybody on the team. I mean, honestly, I don't see how this kid goes anywhere but FSU at this point.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll come back. I agree. I think that one's over. I think it's just waiting to make sure that everyone has done their ceremonial duties, and we'll go from there. Let's go back to the transfer portal guys, and of course, Miami defensive tackle Daryl Jackson, who played for Corey Fuller, who's director of player development for Florida State, committed a couple weeks ago. Another transfer portal guy that signed today. I got kind of I think both you and I are expecting big things from Daryl. I got kind of an interesting comment on the board saying that he was Miami's third best defensive tackle. I think it was a little bit better than that. He started all 12 games, so he was one of their first two. But listen, I think he's a guy that if he plays up to his potential and gets this waiver that he'll need to be eligible, whether he's, he would be a great replacement for Lovett if Lovett does not come back. And can you imagine those two guys lined up next to each other next year?
Yeah, I mean, if you go look at Miami, he was by far their most consistent. I think Leonard Taylor was probably the more upside of the two. But I could tell you this, talking to guys that are close to University of Miami, this is the one guy they did not want to lose. I could tell you that flat out. They thought that this guy was an important piece for their defense next year to continue to improve. This is a big loss for them. Like you said, you take Lovett out of the defense for a few games this year. You saw what happened. FSU struggled to stop the run in the middle. This guy helps plug that gap that if Lovett does decide to go to the NFL, there isn't going to be a drop-off, if any. I think, honestly, they may even improve because he's a bigger, longer, stronger guy than Lovett. I think he provides a lot in that run game. He's not going to give you a whole lot as a pass rusher up the middle, but you know how that is. If you could push the pocket back, FSU has the edge rushers to kind of close in on a quarterback. So he's going to be able to do his job. I think he's a big piece to their success next year on that defensive line.
Yeah, I do too. I think he's got a chance to be an outstanding player. And when you add him to the Farmers of the world and Malcolm Ray's and to Fossey, who's got a chance to be a really good player. I think they've got a chance to be really deep at defensive tackle next year, particularly if Lovett comes back. But I expect big things out of Daryl Jackson, and I think they brought him in here to make a difference on this defense, and he could certainly do that. All right, we'll go what everybody likes to hear about is quarterbacks, right? And Florida State did land a quarterback for the 2023 class, and Brock Glenn from Memphis, Tennessee. Just kind of tell me what you think about him.
Yeah, you know me, I'm of the belief you got to sign a quarterback every year, no matter what. You never know with these guys. We've seen so many five-star kids flame out. What they've done with Jordan Travis and developing him, you think one of these other young guys that they brought in, and Brock Glenn's one of those guys. He's going to have to be developed. The physical talent's there. He can make the throws. You do have some concerns with the footwork and the throwing mechanics, but that's what coaching's for. That's what those guys work every day in spring practice, through summer practice, fall practice, is working on those things. Those things can improve. Overall, he's able to put the ball on the mark. When he has time to throw, you can see he throws guys open. He anticipates well. He can make all the throws. And honestly, he has a lot of the tools that can be successful in a Mike Norvell offense. He's another guy, one of these guys, I believe, if he has that run game and he could do play action, he could do a lot of positive things. I'm a big Brock Glenn fan. Is he a guy that's going to come in and you expect day one? No, but they don't need that. They got Jordan. They got two other guys that have been in the system at least now. One in H.A. Duffy that's going into his second year. I think Tate's going into his third or fourth year at this point. So they got guys that could put some separation between these guys. I think Glenn is a big addition because I believe you have to sign a quarterback every year. I do not think you do yourself any favors, especially in this day and age with the transfer portal. You want to have a guy that you recruited, that if you have to break the glass, that emergency glass, that he can get it done.
Yeah, and this will be if you're not our age or if you're 10 years younger than Fish Rod, this comparison may not mean anything to you. We're showing our age here, Fish. But when you and I separately started looking at Florida State quarterbacks in the past, and we went way back to find the guy that he reminds us of, but Brock Glenn kind of reminds us of Casey Weldon. He's a sneaky good athlete. Throws the ball very well, has great command in the pocket, can move around, buy time, climb the pocket, get out, all the play action stuff. And I think he's right for Mike Norvell's offense. He's got an effortless deep ball, throws it very effortlessly, a great touch, leads his receivers, and really, as we all know, Mike's going to take shots downfield, and this is a guy that can certainly do that. But sneaky athletic, seems comfortable in the pocket even when it gets dirty. Listen, his offense didn't. I think he threw for about 1,700 yards. That's they didn't throw the ball a ton at his high school, but certainly a guy that kind of fits what Mike's offense and Alex have tried to do over the last couple of years. So excited for Brock, and listen. If he turns out to be anywhere close to Casey Weldon, so will Seminole fans. They'll all be excited about Brock.
No question about it.
All right. Listen, let's go back to the big boys since we just got Chris Otto. Chris Otto and Lucas Simmons, both offensive tackle prospects, have signed with Florida State today. Let's start with Lucas. Number one, he signed first, so we'll let him go. We'll talk about him first. You look at him, you watch his film, and he needs to develop a little. He's got to get bigger. He's got to be stronger. But Fish, it's very easy to see this guy developing into a dominant player at the major college football level.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a decade probably that FSU's got a traditional tackle or left tackle prospect. This guy fits the bill. When you go all the way back maybe to Roderick Johnson was probably the last guy they signed like this. That's 6'6", 6'7". He's not super long, but he has good length. He's not one of these guys that his arms go down to his ankles, but he does have good length. He's got very good feet. He's raw. He's going to have to be developed. He's probably going to need a red shirt to get bigger and stronger. I don't know what type of weight program they have at Clearwater International Academy, but I'm sure it's nothing like Florida State's. But he gets in that weight program, gets bigger and stronger. With offensive linemen, I don't really care about technique that much on high school kids because that's something that can be taught. You want to know that they can set, they can slide step, they can kick out, they have athletic ability, they can redirect. If they're not stiff in their lower body, all the important traits you need to be an elite left tackle. This kid has them, and he's the best tackle prospect they've signed probably in over a decade. And people have complained about the left tackle spot. I think this kid's going to finally fix a lot of those issues. And as well as I do, they've signed a lot of these guys that are more guards and had to play them at tackle. They're not going to have that problem with Lucas Simmons.
Yeah, listen, I am looking forward to watching him develop over the next 2 or 3 years. Like you said, I think it's going to take a year in the weight room. I think he's got to get stronger in his lower body. He's better at pass blocking than most high school kids are. I think where he's got to develop in particular, which you don't see a lot on high school tape, is his run blocking. But, hey, the one thing that impressed me, Fish, when I watched his high school tape, he gets downfield on some runs where they pull him or some screens, and he's athletic enough where he can chop his feet and lock up on a smaller guy, right? I mean, he gets up on him pretty fast and then settles, and some smaller DBs that you would think could run around him or make him miss. And just talk a little bit about that. You don't see that much in a guy that big.
No, that's the one thing when you see big guys that can move, it's so important, especially that athletic ability. You want those guys that can move laterally, and then too, are they fluid enough in the hips to flip back inside? Because anybody can set up and push a guy wide, but it's that when that defensive end comes out wide and then comes back inside, you want to make sure you see it on Byers' film. He can really basically make that move before the defensive end makes it because their mind and their athleticism are on the same page. Florida State hasn't had that. You have these guys you can see these guys all have the same thing common with them is they're all athletic and they all have that ability to move down the field, get to that second level. They can get to those linebackers and DBs, and that's huge. That's how a lot of those big runs are set up is from guys being able to get out in that space and get onto those smaller guys.
Yeah, listen, when I saw that, I've watched this tape several times, but went back through it last night just to kind of refresh my memory, and that was one of the things that stood out, just the fact that he could get up on guys that are smaller than him and stay locked on to him. And listen, he tries to have a nasty streak at times too, so you got to like that. He will try to bury guys in the dirt if he can. Of course, our next guy is a guy that you liked when you discovered him down there at Key West High School, and a guy that I was impressed with when I saw him at Florida State Seminole Showcase Camp in July is Chris Otto. you like his potential. And then we got to know him a little bit. We taped a Really in the Men segment with him. We talked to him after his official visit last week. He's just kind of a different, he's an interesting kid. He's got a lot of interest outside athletics. You can see some things from, what you feel are intangibles that you kind of like about him, but he's got a great personality. He's got a vision for his future, and he's an outstanding prospect. Just talk a little bit about what you saw in Chris and why you think he's a good take. And he's probably another guy that's going to be a couple years away, like Lucas Simmons.
Yeah, you and I are going to have Jerry get us the Christopher Otto fan club T-shirts, because I think both of us are big fans. How can you not like this kid? You heard him. The one thing that I liked when we go back and we did that Reeling It In segment, he talked about how their team was a wing T team, and he predominantly just did run blocking. And he said on his own, he went out there and worked on pass blocking and worked on stuff. And that, to me, if you're self-motivated, and we talked about this, you could have all the athletic ability in the world, but the one thing with the lineman, it's not like a wide receiver. Are you coachable? Are you willing to take to coaching? Are you willing to put in the extra work? Are you willing to go into that weight room and work harder than everybody else? And if this kid's willing to do that, and I think he is, all right, you've seen his personality. Yep. and how he responds to stuff. And I don't think this is the type of kid that's going to sit there and go, oh, well, I didn't start my freshman year, I'm out of here. I really think he'll buy into all that stuff that people talk about as culture and locker room and all of this. I think Chris Otto is one of those kids that believes in all that, and he's going to live by it, and he's going to be a very, very good player 2-3 years down the road.
Yeah, you got to be careful when you cheer for a prospect, because you kind of like his personality and who he is as a person, and so you kind of try to step back from that. But we both liked him as a player. Listen, they had some very good defensive ends and defensive tackles at the Seminole Showcase Camp in July, and they did those one-on-one pass pro drills, and Chris held his own. You could see his ability to bend. He's a very physical kid. Obviously, there'll be some adjustment to do because he's going to be playing against much bigger people, but he's got the right mentality. I think he's got kind of the right outlook on his life, really. I mean, he wanted to go to a place where Florida State, or where they had a great film school. Obviously, Florida State does have a great film school, so glad it worked out for Chris. Because we did find out, Fish, you'll be disappointed to know, I think he wrestles too.
Yeah.
And I believe he had to quit his job at the ice cream shop because it conflicted with practice. So anyway.
Hey, if they say Christopher Otto is the smartest guy in the room, or believes he is actually. If you looked at his offers, yes. Princeton and Harvard and Stanford. If we're in the room together, I honestly will be way. I'm nowhere close as smart as that kid. So.
I just don't want to ask him a stupid question.
You're good for that.
Yes, I am. All right, so let's go to talk about some receivers. Like we said, we are anticipating Hakeem Williams to be made official in the next 30 minutes or so. But, Darren Lawrence, 6'2", 190. Goldie Lawrence, tell us a little bit about what your thoughts are on Goldie. You've seen him play a bunch, and I know you really like what he brings to the table. Yeah.
I mean, ironically, I think he's Ron Dugan's. Ron Dugan's looks in the mirror. He's going to see, this Goldie Lawrence kid, very similar type of players. Not a guy that's going to stretch the field, but he can get open. He has good size. I think he's going to be effective in the crossing routes and across the middle of the field, and also in the red zone. 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, you need a possession receiver. I believe he can make those catches. He's a good football player. Like I said, not every guy's going to run a 4-3, 4-4. You need some of those guys that on 3rd and 8 can move the chains, and I think that's what his ceiling and that's what his ability will tell you he's going to be at that next level.
Of course, another kid who was highly productive, has great hands, and is unbelievable after the catch, has some real instincts as a ball carrier, is Van Trevis Jacobs, Dre Jacobs. He was highly productive this year. Kind of a smaller kid that's probably another kid that may need a year before he's ready to play major college football. Weighs about $150, which is probably a little bit small right now, but he's a guy that's long. He's about 6 foot, 6'1". Just tell us what you think about Dre.
You look at how the game's changed, and guys, you look at both college and the NFL. Now that you can't really be physical with receivers, these guys that have that speed and quickness to get open, get down the field. He can stretch the field. Florida State needs playmakers. They got some last year, but I'm talking true difference makers at the wide receiver position that scare defensive coordinators. I think Jacobs is one of those guys that can do that. He has that deep speed. You could see his high school film. He gets separation. There's guys that are small and fast, but that doesn't mean they get separation. He gets distance between himself and the defender a lot of times. And once he's in the open field, nobody's going to catch him. What's crazy with Jacobs too, I like this with high school athletes, he could play both sides of the ball. Worst case scenario, I think he could also be a shutdown corner on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah, and listen, that's going to be a recurring theme as we get into some of these guys. That they got some guys that can play multiple positions on one side of the ball, and in some cases play on both sides of the ball. Listen, we aren't expecting any surprises, and we can talk about him a little bit more later if you like. But just, I mean, we all think he's a difference maker. He's one of the most highly recruited wide receivers in the class of 2023. And you've seen him a ton over the course of his high school career. What are you thinking of, as far as how quickly Hakeem Williams could come in here and compete for a starting position?
I think Hakeem could come in if he has the right mindset and as he's willing to put in the work. I think he can make an impact right away. He's a difference maker. When he walks in the room, I remember going to media day this year in Broward County. There was 3 or 4 guys that walked in, and he was one of them. He looks different. He looks like Julio Jones did coming out of high school. I remember meeting Julio at the Florida State camp. He's grown, man. I mean, he looks different. He acts different. He plays at a different level. All the physical talent that Hakeem has. He's a guy that I really think you look at Johnny Wilson. Wilson gives you some of that big play ability because of his size, but Hakeem can create those big plays just based on his speed, his athleticism. He's a major mismatch. He's a guy that can take a 5-yard pass and go 60 yards. He's a rare commodity. And I think he's honestly, this may be one of the best receivers Florida State's signed in a decade. When you go back and look at the guys they've signed, whether it's him, a Javon Walker, and you go all the way back to Randy Moss. And I'm not going to compare him to a Hall of Famer, but as far as physical talent, speed, all the attributes that you're looking in for a big-time receiver, Hakeem has them. Now it's up to him. We've seen this story so many times before. It's up to these players. Even the top elite ones have to put that hard work in. If you want to be great, you got to continue to work. If Hakeem's willing to put that time in, I think he could be a special player at Florida State.
Yeah, he's definitely got all the physical tools that you need to be successful, and a guy that kind of fits what Mike likes to do on offense, which is get those big chunk plays in the pass game and then run it over people. And speaking of running over people and running around people, they have signed Sam Singleton from the Jacksonville area, running back. Gets up to he's got a great burst, north-south runner. But I'll let you kind of expound on what we like about Sam.
I think the theme here is these guys are taking these rooms to that next level, especially athletically and speed wise. Sam's that guy. You saw it when Dalvin was here. You've seen it when they've done it for a very long time. Those stretch runs where you're able to get outside that tackle box and you're able to stretch the field. Chris Thompson is someone that I think Sam's very similar to. Sam's bigger, but his running style is kind of the same. They have that straight line speed, not a whole lot of wiggle, but once they get that edge and they get into that open field, there's no one that's going to catch them. Sam's going to be able to bring some of that big play ability and the way they block. If their receivers give the same blocking to Sam, you're going to see those 30, 40-yard runs become long touchdown runs. And I really like his ability to create the big play.
Yeah, he's got the nice little jump cut when he has when he feels pressure from the inside and can bounce things outside. But you're right, he is more of a north-south. There's not a whole lot of shiftiness in him. He's got good lateral movement, but I wouldn't think what you would see. You don't have great change of direction. I mean, can't change direction like a Warwick Dunn or somebody like that. Good. He's kind of a bigger back. And listen, he likes to try to run through people at times, and he does when he runs behind his pads. Runs a little bit high sometimes, but listen, there's been a lot of great backs that have done that, right? Eric Dickerson, I don't want to compare him to a Hall of Famer, but Eric Dickerson used to run straight up too. So, but anyway, can catch the ball in the backfield. You see some of that in his huddle highlights, but a kid that will add to the depth of Florida State's running back room, which right now is extremely deep, particularly if Benson were to come back for next season. Good take on offense. Just your overall thoughts on offense and, you think there may be any more surprises or any more additions to offense as we continue forward?
I think it's gonna be more portal than anything else. We pretty much have known the names that they're recruiting. Most of the stuff has been on the defensive side of the ball, those kind of guys that have jumped out of nowhere. Overall, it's a very good offensive class. They've got size in there. They got speed. They improved the whole line. I like balance in these classes. I don't care where classes are really ranked. I think when you're doing roster management and you want balance in the class, they hit on every position on the offensive side of the ball, and that's all you can ask.
Yeah, I thought it was a very good day offensively, and as you said, they may not be done yet. Moving over to the defense, the first guy that signed this morning was a FSU legacy, Lamont Green Jr. Obviously, a lot to like about Lamont. Long, lean, gets off the ball very quickly, can bend. Just your thoughts on Lamont and how he fits into this defense and how quickly he might be able to contribute.
Yeah, Lamont committed so early and has been such a Florida State fan and shut it down that I think it took some of the excitement out of his recruitment. I believe that if he had waited till today and he committed, this would be a bigger deal. I think he's such a talented pass rusher. He had 2 games in 1 week this year because of weather, and he had 7 sacks in 2 games. That tells you what type of pass rusher he is. He can, get up the field. He's strong enough to set the edge. He can help out in the run game as far as shutting it down. He can redirect. What I want to see when I see an edge rusher come up the edge is that when they kick back outside, he can redirect and go chase a guy down. And he has that ability to do that. Some guys can't do that. Once they get up the field, it's almost like they're stuck in mud. They can't change direction. Lamont has the ability to not only change direction, but chase that guy down. He reminds me of some of the guys back in the old days that they used to recruit, whether it was a Peter Boulware or Raynar Wilson, one of these guys that may not be the biggest, but, man, they have that explosiveness off the edge. He's a much different football player than his father, who was a traditional inside Mike backer back in the day. This kid has the ability to play anywhere on the defense. They can have his hand up. They can have it on the ground. They can play him in space. I think he's a super talented kid. He probably should be a 5-star recruit. He's, like I said, mainly because he committed so early, it took a lot of the steam out of his whole recruitment.
Yeah, one thing that popped out to me on his highlight tape was sometimes he gets so low trying to bend the corner fish that offensive lineman doesn't really have any surface area to get their hands on him, which is, kind of freakish for a guy his size. And listen, he is in high school. He has gotten by just on straight speed and bull rush. Wait till he learns a little technique and some fundamentals of, getting rid of somebody's hands and swimming and ripping and all those things. You really don't see that from it.
Well, that's what Von Miller does. He's able to stretch low, get underneath that offensive tackle's pads, and then shoot. And then he has that explosiveness. He could get really low, and then boom, it's like he's shot out of a rocket. And he's impressive the way he can get off. He could get off that edge and create. He's very hectic and creates chaos on that defensive line.
Yeah, he does. And speaking of another guy that creates chaos on the defensive line is Keith KJ Sampson, the defensive tackle Florida State signed. And I believe you compared him to some of the guys that Clemson has signed recently, like Brian Breezy. He's a huge kid. Again, another kid for his size, gets off the ball really well when he plays with leverage. At least at the high school level, he could not be blocked. He split double teams very easily. He's a physical kid that plays hard. Just give me your thoughts on KJ Sampson.
Yeah, I always remember go back when somebody told me how Butch Davis would evaluate defensive linemen. He wanted, if they were recruiting the guy, he better be the first one off the ball. And that's the one thing you see with Sampson. He's the first one off the ball. It's almost like he knows what the center is going to do. He gets off that ball. He's really aggressive. He shoots the gaps. He's a guy that can give you a pass rush in the middle of the defensive line because of how quick he is off the ball. He's explosive. He's one of those guys that FSU's had in the past, whether it's an Eddie Goldman, whether it's a Timmy Jernigan. He's going to take that defensive tackle position to that next level. I think he has more talent than the guy that was on the roster last year, the Lovitts and the Coopers. And people are like, that's what you want to do, is you want to continue to upgrade from what you have. And that is what this kid does.
Now, is he a guy, Fish, that you think can come in and compete for playing time right away?
Well, I mean, they have jobs. They have jobs open this year. It's not like any of those guys that are on that roster are proven. They have experience. Now that's the one edge, but none of them, you saw when Lovett and Cooper at times were not healthy, that they struggled. So you got to think that if these guys come in and they work hard, they're going to have a chance at least to get some quality playing time this first year.
Yeah, and we'll stay on the defensive line with junior college defensive end Jaden Jones from Hutchinson, Kansas. Was not able to play all season, had an injury, had surgery, is recouping from that. He told us when he was in on his official visit that he will be limited in spring practice. But Fish, when you look at this kid on the hoof, man, I mean, he looks like a player. He's got muscles everywhere. He looks the part. He's one of those guys you want to get off the bus first, even if he's not playing.
Yeah, I'm not going to doubt whether these kids can come in and contribute, these older kids anymore, after I said Verse would take at least half a year. Hey, listen, I could bust on myself. Verse ended up better. I thought we'd see the Verse that we saw this year next year. And honestly, it's upsetting we didn't see that because he's probably going to leave early. But Jaden has a lot of the same qualities. He's big, long, athletic. It's a disappointment that he didn't get any junior college film this year, at least that experience, because he's going to be set back a little. He hasn't played, I don't think, real football in 2 years as far as an actual game. So that's a little concerning. But I'm not going to doubt what these guys can do, especially at that defensive end spot. The coaches are already proven themselves. He's a man. So a lot of that stuff that he needs to understand of how to get to that level to play, he understands that. And he's not a young kid. He's not a guy that's coming out of high school that just expects to start. He had to go the junior college route and work himself up. So if he puts in the time over this offseason to get that knee back to strength, and in the fall he puts in the time, he'll at least be a situational guy that could come in and give them some reps and do pretty well. But I'm not going to predict on like when he'll do that, because he'll probably come out against LSU next year and have 3 sacks, and I'll look like a fool again. So,
well, hey, listen, some of what we did with First was everybody was going so crazy over Jermaine Johnson last year after that year he had. We were trying to temper expectations.
That's what I was trying to do. But
yeah, I mean, we were trying to do the public good, right? We were trying to make sure that if he didn't live up to Jermaine, that
I felt like Nick O'Leary in front of that bus. All right, like I got run over on that one. All right,
there are times. Listen, that Fish. There's all right. Anytime I've ever graded a kid, when I was working for Scout.com or Fox, or even when I was working at USF and the South Carolina recruiting office back when I was a GA, I used to love to be wrong that way. Like, if I was said a kid was going to underperform and he overperformed, I was always glad to be wrong. And listen, I'm glad to be wrong about Jared Verse. I hope we're wrong about him going out.
That's how I am. I'm like, I like to tone it down a little bit and rather take the precautionary side of it than to go all in and then the kid doesn't make a play. So
yeah. I'm with you. But hey, listen, we'll move on to some other players, and one of my favorite guys in this class, and really you don't hear a lot about him compared to some of the other guys that have signed, but Quintarius Jones, he's an athlete. He plays wide receiver. He plays outside linebacker. Looks like he could play safety. He's an extremely good athlete, competes hard, runs extremely well at receiver. He has unbelievable ball skills and concentration. Tell us a little bit about what you like about Quindarius and where you think he could end up eventually. I could see him at outside linebacker. I could see him at safety. I could see him at wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, his game kind of has some similarities to Roy Williams, who played at Oklahoma. I think he's a guy that can play in the box. He can play in coverage. He can come up, stuff the run. I think he's probably one of the most underrated players in their class. I actually got excited when I watched his film because I'm like, who's this no-name kid, no-star kid that they're getting out of Mississippi? He really, if this kid was going to one of the SEC schools, he'd be a mid-high 4-star kid, I think. I just think because he went under the radar and he's from Mississippi and he's going to Florida State and nobody really knows about him. I think his ranking is way too low. This is a guy that is versatile. Another guy, we talk about this before. You want to recruit a guy that's not stuck to one position, because if that one position doesn't work out, you're stuck with a player that's just a depth guy that's, robbing time from somebody else. But he's shown on film he could play corner, he could play safety, he could play linebacker. Like you said, he's versatile enough to be moved around. He's not stuck at one position. I think he could have a very good career. I wouldn't be surprised if he was running down on kicks day one on special teams. He seems like a guy that'll take to special teams right away.
Yeah, he can run. There's no doubt about that. And listen, we've seen him move Brendan Gant from safety to linebacker because of what the spread off RPO offenses force defenses to defend. And he's a guy that, like, I agree, Fish. He could end up at one of 3 or 4 positions, and he could end up on either side of the ball. What blew me away was his ball skills at wide receiver, and and of course he was just as impressive on defense. A guy that you really like is another versatile athlete, Edwin Joseph, who just signed with Florida State, plays wide receiver, DB. What are you expecting him to do at Florida State? Corner?
Yeah, I think he's a corner. I know that's where Randy's going to probably like him. I think he's very similar to a prospect that Randy had recruited out of high school at University of Miami, Sam Shields. Sam Shields was a wide receiver that was converted corner. Edwin's actually played corner, so that transition to that side of the ball won't be as difficult it was for Sam right away, learning how to play on defense. And listen, you got to like guys that played offense. They know what wide receivers are going to do on certain plays. They could kind of read their minds. I think Edwin's a super talented player. He played on a team that was loaded this year. They had 2 5-star receivers for 2024 class, so he went under the radar. I think Florida State stole one here. I think this is a kid that could get on that field pretty early. If he's another one that if he just hits the ground running, he has a chance to make an impact right away.
Yeah. Another kid I really like that I can't he's been committed for a long time, but kind of a quiet kid, kind of flew under the radar. Jabril Rawls, who from Pensacola Catholic High School, you and I visited with him for about 20 minutes one day. Another guy with a really good personality you like off the field, but you watch him on the field. Long, lean, athletic, can play safety, can play corner, can play wide receiver. Great, competes for the ball, whether he's on defense or on offense. One of the more underrated guys, in my opinion, that Florida State has signed in this class. What are your thoughts on Jabril?
Well, what you got to like is here's a guy that said the year before this top receiver from Navarre took it to him, and it was a challenge, and he stepped up this year going against a kid going to Georgia. Actually, I think he's from Milton High School, the wide receiver. So he was able to shut him down in this game. That shows you that he took it upon himself to get better in that offseason. He's a real long, athletic, rangy guy. I think he's another guy that could be very good. He's a player, though, I don't think he's ready to play right away. He's going to have to get bigger and stronger. You see his body. He's not ready for college right now, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not every one of these guys needs to play right away. I think fans in general need to understand that some of these guys are coming from high schools. They're not like it's a big step up. I mean, some of these schools going from playing, in Pensacola or these smaller towns, and then all of a sudden you're playing a Wake or a Duke or a NC State. The grade up from that level to those schools is a major big jump in competition. You're going against grown men, and guys like Rawls need to become men. He needs to get in that weight room. He really needs to put on the weight, get bigger and stronger. I think he has the right mindset. Talking to him, speaking with him on the chat, I liked what we heard from him. Another guy that you got to like what you hear from him. He says all the right things.
Yeah, listen, with the advent of the portal and the no penalty for transferring, teams are going to fill immediate needs through the portal to the best of their ability. So guys like Jabril and Lucas Simmons and some of the rest of these guys, Chris Otto, so they can take time to have a year or two to develop. And, you would certainly think that some of these freshmen will ultimately be redshirted or play in the 4 games that they can and not lose a year of eligibility. All right, a position of great need for Florida State where they really need some depth and some talented depth is at linebacker in their 4-2-5 defense. Obviously got a boost when Tatum Bethune decided he'd return. You got, I think 4 guys coming back, maybe 5 at linebacker, but Kalen DeLoach, both starters coming back. DeMarco Ward, a physical linebacker from North Georgia. What do you think about DeMarco Ward? He's kind of more of a between the tackles guy, but he's a physical specimen that plays hard. You don't see him play against the pass a lot in his highlight tape, but just your thoughts on DeMarco.
Yeah, I do think I don't know if he's an every down linebacker. I think he will be effective against the run. He can play forward. lateral quickness, being able to get into those flats, chasing running backs. I don't know if that's his strength because you don't see a whole lot of it on film. You don't see him do some of the other things. He kind of is more of a between the tackles in the box type of guy, downhill, old school type of linebacker. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops. I think he's more of one of those guys that's going to have to be developed in some of those aspects that we're talking about. Can he do it? Like I said, I don't know the kid personally. I haven't met him or seen him live, and I'd like to see more of him live to really get a better idea of what type of talent he is.
Well, speaking of throwbacks, the other linebacker Florida State signed was Blake Nicholson from Manteca, California, Manteca High School. Listen, he plays linebacker, leads his team in rushing, a leading receiver on his football team, one of their top tacklers. There's nothing he did not do for his high school. Just a natural football player with natural-born instincts. What are your expectations for Blake coming in to next season?
Blake's probably one of my favorite players in the class. I don't want to – if there's one player that he reminds me of is Brian Cushing coming out of high school, and the fact that he played running back, he plays linebacker, he plays off the edge, he plays all these positions. Physically, you got to like what you see out of him. He can run laterally. He can cover a tight end. He can drop back into coverage and get deep into the seam and help out in that aspect. I think he's a guy that can play all the downs. I like what you see out of him. He's one of my favorite players in the class. And I do think at worst case scenario, he'll get on special teams as a freshman and make an impact his second year. But I do think he's someone that could get on the field and see quality minutes.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of a kid named Jake Knott, who was an all Big 12 linebacker for Iowa State about 10 years ago, and can run well, can make plays over the field. They're built about the same. He ended up playing for the Eagles for a little while, but I think he's a tremendous player and a guy that similar to Quindarius, who will probably at least contribute on special teams right away, if not bring some quality depth. But where they are at linebacker, I think both these kids will be given a chance to get in that linebacker rotation. But certainly Blake is a guy that is a throwback to the days where people played both ways. And they played every snap of the ball game. So he's a guy that obviously is in great shape and a guy that you would think would be ready for FSU's offseason program. I don't think he's reporting until the summer, but certainly a good take and someone that I think Florida State's excited about having, just like they are these other kids. But I think Florida State fans will be impressed if they turn on Blake's highlight tape and see just how much he plays for his high school. I'm assuming he's getting close to 100 snaps a game in any one ball game, and as you well know, that's a lot of football. But ran for over 1,700 yards. Led his team in receiving, and of course was their best defensive player. And listen, they used him all over the place as a senior fish. He played inside linebacker, he played outside linebacker. Saw him lined up on receivers out on the boundary, and saw him play some safety. So listen, he was one of those guys that's just the best player on just about every field he has stepped on, but certainly a tremendous future. Another guy I really like from a physicality standpoint is Kenton Kirkland. From Jacksonville. He's a very physical safety. From a physicality standpoint, he reminds me of Jamie Robinson. He's longer than Jamie, but just talk about your thoughts on Kenton.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some film of him playing some corner. You could tell he is going to be slide inside and play the safety position. He's what they're looking for, a bigger, longer, athletic guy. He does have some of Jamie Robinson's qualities. He's a guy that can go drop into coverage, can cover, he's got size to cover possibly a tight end down the middle of the field and cover some of those bigger receivers. He's physical. He doesn't mind coming up and tackling, which these days is a rarity. I mean, a lot of guys shy away from contact. He's not one of those players. He comes from a school that does produce talent. I like that they play a lot of quality competition up there in Jacksonville. I think he's a very good player. Is he going to be a superstar? That'll be determined, but he's a guy that could come in. He'll help improve that defensive back room that has had some guys not pan out. I think he can help improve that depth and get some quality minutes possibly next year.
I was impressed with his tape, and we saw him in his official visit. He is a good-looking kid as far as he's long, athletic-looking, and a guy that I think another kid that could probably come up. And we know one thing: if they can help on special teams, Mike will play them. We've seen that with Brian Courtney and several other true freshmen this season. Fish, of course, we've got a couple of questions. We had one it was kind of a surprise. Keldrick Falk signed with Auburn today, was committed to Florida State up until the 11th hour, had come in on an unofficial visit on Saturday. Then there were reports that Keldrick had gone to Auburn to meet with Hugh Freeze on the last day before the NCAA dead period. Just talk a little bit about how you think that played out. And, I think there's some other guys that are probably on FSU's radar at defensive end that are not high school guys. But just talk about what your thoughts were on losing Falk and how that impacts this class.
Yeah, I mean, it's a disappointment because one, pass rushers, edge rushers, guys that can set the edge are in high demand. I mean, there's a reason why, you see guys go high in the draft every year that can give you that pass rush off the edge. And he was physically developed to play at the next level. A lot of these guys, you look at Boots, you look at Lamont Green Jr., he's not as physically developed. Now, I think he has more upside, but Falk had the tools. I thought he was very similar to Josh Sweat, that he could come in and at least play physically. Now, mentally, getting the defense down, getting the assignments down, that's a different story. But physically, he was ready to play day one. He was one of my favorite players in the class. I thought FSU really found a very good player. The whole thing of guys, this is where, you just never know when it comes down to those states like Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. This is part of the negative side of recruiting those states is those homeschool states could come in at the last minute and flip a kid. And it happens all the time. And it's, you know what, you got to recruit numbers at that position. And if you lose somebody like this, they have a Lamont Green Jr., they're still good at that position. But I agree. I do think they're going to have to go outside and recruit a portal kid here to fill that need, because they do. It's a one position. If first leaves, we all like what Patrick Pate has provided so far, but he hasn't proven that he's an every down player at this level. It could happen next year. That jump could happen, but nobody's done it yet. So you want somebody to fill that need. You don't want to lose. They've lost two great DNs, and yes, this staff's done a great job of developing that DN position, but Falk had a chance to be a special player. I still think the kid is going to be very good, but I just find it very it's upsetting from a standpoint that they've stayed on this kid all year. He committed to them. He gave them their word, and I know people can say, oh, the word, this, that, loyalty. Listen, they recruited him for what, 1 or 2 weeks, that Auburn staff. FSU recruited for over a year. That's where it's a disappointing thing, is you spent so much time and resources in a guy that you thought you were going to get.
Yeah, listen, you watch his tape, and he is just phenomenal. I mean, he's a guy a rare freshman that could probably come in and play as a true freshman up front in a 4-3 defense. But I was disappointed for Florida State. Wish they had been able to hold on to him. Listen, Florida State may not be done yet. We understand that Conrad Hussey is still a potential signee today. He's been committed to Penn State. What are you hearing about Conrad, and what kind of player could Florida State get? And we will have folks. We will have an update. We're going to do another live show at 7:30 tonight, so we will have updates on Conrad Hussey and some other guys. But just talk a little bit about what you think of Conrad Hussey from St. Thomas Aquinas.
By the way, and I'll promote it now, we do have a guest coming in at 7:30. One of the recruits that committed to Florida State is going to be coming in on live to talk to you and me, and hopefully we do a good job of propping him up. But yeah, I mean, Hussey's another guy, very talented player, comes from a program you always like to recruit, a St. Thomas Aquinas kid, because from a character standpoint, being part of a program, what it means, they understand that it's a team game there, because they have so many players on their team. You have to buy in. He's a system type player. Is he an elite level? Is he Derwin James? No. But can he be a Terrence Brooks? Yes. You need the Terrence Brooks types to win championships, and he's one of those guys that could come in and give you that type of productivity on the football field.
All right, a couple other guys that are Florida State's in the mix for is one of them is Virginia cornerback Fintrell Deuce Cypress. He could pop today. He could pop before before they enroll in school. You would think that he's going to enroll wherever he goes by January, so he can be here for spring practice. Have you had a chance to look at Fintrell at all, and what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think he'd probably be day one FSU's best cover corner. He's a very good player. Virginia has a history of providing the NFL with a lot of long athletic corners. This kid fits the mold of what you're looking for in a guy. He can take half the field and shut it down. And when you have a shutdown corner on one side of the field, you've worked on that. When you're looking at the defensive side of the ball, and a defensive coordinator could say, hey, just shut down this side of the field. You could roll your coverages over to the other side of the field and help those guys out. It makes a big difference. You can call so many more plays on that defensive side of the field. I think he's that type of player. He'd be a big addition to the Florida State recruiting class.
Yeah, another kid another transfer there in play with is defensive tackle from Western Michigan, Brandon Fisk. A lot of people think it's down to Florida State, Notre Dame, and maybe one other school. He is hurt. We don't know if he'd be able to go through spring practice, but he's a guy that was highly productive in the MAC and highly sought after. I know Oklahoma, several people have offered him outside of Florida State and Notre Dame, but there's not a timeline for today, or no one's exactly sure when he's going to announce. But what are your thoughts on Fisk and what he could bring to this defense if he wanted to choose Florida State?
I think he'd bring some depth, quality depth. I don't know how much of an impact he'd make. I like him. He says he's 6'3", 300 pounds. He doesn't look that big on film. I do like some of the things he can help in the run game. I don't know how much of a pass rush he's going to give you from the inside. They can't slide him out in some pass rushing situations. He's a good player. I think he would provide depth to their team. As far as Florida State, this is a Midwest kid. I don't really know what the ties are other than he played with Wyatt Rector. A lot of that comes in with these transfers is those connections with the coaches, the prior coaches that have worked with him. That's a lot of what the portal's about, is relationships. And really, I'm not sure what type of relationship Florida State has with him.
Anybody else you would keep an eye on today?
That's about it. I think we've gone over every player and who they're really on. There was, Andy Jean ended up signing with the University of Florida today. So most of the guys that we talked about or discussed on the message boards or in articles or stories that we have written, pretty much everybody is accounted for. We don't believe in that mystery guest or mystery recruit. We're not going to put that out there. That's not our thing. But overall, very good class. I think with the portal kids, top to bottom, this is probably the best class that this staff has brought in since they've been here.
Yeah, and listen, I think they're still going to and just so everybody knows, because we're getting ready to wrap up for the afternoon show, Hakeem Williams' signing ceremony is happening right now. We would think that will be official sometime after he does his ceremonial signing, gets the paperwork to Florida State, and they can announce it officially. So we are expecting that to wrap up soon. Fish, I think there's a couple of positions, particularly I think we've already talked about, if Verse were to leave, not getting Falk, you think they'll address defensive end in the portal between now and next fall?
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, they not only do they need a pass rusher if Verse leaves, they need depth. You don't want to just have one guy, because you saw even Verse this year got hurt. You don't want to be in a position. It made a big difference they probably win another game or two if those defensive linemen don't go down. It made a big difference. They had a great season, but you still would have liked to see some quality depth behind those guys, just in case. You want to just in case your guy goes down, and that's going to happen in college football. You're going to have guys go down for 2 or 3 games. That's just the way the game is now.
Yeah, and listen, I would be surprised if they didn't go after a transfer portal linebacker between now and you got both starters back, but you don't have a lot of numbers there scholarship-wise. Do you anticipate Florida State bringing in a linebacker between now and the start of fall camp through the portal?
I definitely can see that. Because right now you've got 2 known quantities in Tatum Bethune and Deloche. After that, it's really, you're just crossing your fingers and hope those guys get better, because you really haven't seen much from everybody else on that roster.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we just got a note. Hakeem has an FSU jersey on his ceremony. So that should,
oh man, everybody calm down.
That should kind of seal the deal there. Now listen, and we'll be back at 7:30 tonight, but do you anticipate Florida? You think they're done on offense after Williams signs, or do you think there's more guys that they could bring in between now and the normal signing date, which is obviously the first Wednesday in February, or even going into the summer? Obviously, things could transpire in the spring, but
it's all going to be determined on what guys leave too. You know, you could have one or two more guys on the offensive line leave because of these transfers coming in. And all of a sudden, one or two guys. I mean, last year they had some injuries on the offensive line with Bless Harris going down. All of a sudden, you have one or two guys that you were counting on. You got to go back in the portal and maybe find somebody else. So it never ends. It's 365 days, 7 days a week. You know how this thing goes now with this. It never ends. It used to be an off season. There is no off season anymore if you're a college football coach.
It's wide open, and it's December 21st, and we haven't made it halfway through the day yet, and we will see what happens the rest of the afternoon. But like I said, we do think that there's a chance that Fentrell Cypress, Conrad Hussey, and Braden Fisk, all of who Florida State's in play with, chance they announce today, chance they announce on down the road. Listen, Fish, thanks for joining us. Like Fish said, we are anticipating having at least one of FSU's signees on the show at 7:30. We will be back on Osceola Facebook, Osceola YouTube TV, and Osceola Twitter at 7:30. We'll probably have more of a roundtable with Jerry Cutts, Kurt Weiler, Bob Ferrante, joining myself and Fish. But listen, a big day for Florida State. These days are always exciting, and we hope you will join us at 7:30 to kind of hear the other guys talk about what they liked about Florida State signing class. And Fish and I will both have some more time to gather our thoughts and refine our thoughts on this signing class as it continues. And Fish will have an update at 7:30 and 8:30 on how he thinks Florida State's two main rivals, Miami and Florida, have done with their signing classes for 2023. Fish, any last thoughts as we head out?
Nah, we did a good job, man.
Yeah, we got through it. We love talking ball. We always do. We always run long, and we went through every prospect that we know about having been signed today. And, of course, a big day for Florida State, a big day for the Osceola as we cover our first National Signing Day live for Rivals Network. And, Fish, thanks for joining us. And for our listeners and subscribers, we hope you'll join us tonight on Osceola Facebook, Osceola YouTube, and Osceola Twitter for the special final edition of Florida State's National Signing Day with the Osceola. And by the way, Vontae B, just on our notes page, our comment section, just announced that Hakeem Williams has just signed his NIL. So we have taken care of the whole class in one show, Fish.
That's it, man. That's why they pay us the big bucks.
That's right. That's right. All right, guys, listeners, watchers, viewers, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll be back at 7:30 tonight. Same place, same channel.